We are here with Daniel Nigh. Really exciting news going on with Ozempic lawsuit right now, and so excited to hear more about the developments. But before we get into that, just give us a little bit of background on you, your firm, and how we got to this point with you here today.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Daniel Nigh. I'm one of the founding partners, one of the four founding partners of the law firm Nigh, Goldenberg, Raso, and Vaughn. We put together this law firm because multiple of our partners, all the partners involved, are co-leads or leaders, court-appointed leaders in many of the different mass tort litigations across the U.S.
I know Brett Vaughn really well, one of your partners, another founding partner, just a wonderful guy and brilliant lawyer. So that's how we came to know your firm, and we're continuing to work with Brett. I talk to him multiple times a week on our hernia mesh litigation, something that he's been really active in for a long time. So, but we are here today for Ozempic, and we're intaking Ozempic cases. We're working with your firm, but just for the people that are out there, what's the Ozempic lawsuit all about from a 30,000-foot level?
Ozempic is obviously a drug that has now been very widely prescribed. Specifically, it's being prescribed for diabetes. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But most people now are actually taking it for weight loss. And one of the side effects that it's causing that we know now, and a decent chunk of the population, we don't know what percent, whether it's 1, 5, 10% of the population are getting gastroparesis, also known as stomach paralysis, or intestinal obstruction. And those injuries can actually be pretty severe. They'll cause people to land in the hospital and have permanencies and things of that nature. So there's certainly a problem, a major side effect with this drug. Those are two of them that we know about. I suspect we're going to find quite a few more that we know about, because at this point, a lot of people are basically kind of guinea pigs for this drug.
So what is Ozempic and who owns it?
Absolutely. Ozempic is what's known as a GLP-1 drug, a class of drug. Basically, the idea is that you can take this drug and treat for diabetes. It has a lot of different ways in which it functions that changes the way your body functions and digests food and things of that nature. But it also has an appetite. It decreases your appetite as well. And part of that's happening because of the delay in the stomach, the emptying of the gastric fluids and again the food in the stomach. That delay is also what's causing the decrease in appetite. But you take that to the extreme, and you have some people who are having very severe stomach paralysis and or very severe intestinal obstruction that cause them to be hospitalized and things of that nature.
So the intended use is for individuals with diabetes, but there's this side effect that's making the drug popular, which is weight loss.
That's right. And just to make this clear, the intended use was initially diabetes. And I think as they saw some of the results in the clinical trials, and they're true, it did show significant weight loss, average significant weight loss across the participants in the clinical trial. So they've gone further, and they've reported that in much of their advertising. But there's something unique about Ozempic. Novo Nordisk is the manufacturer of Ozempic. And there's something unique about Novo Nordisk and how they've marketed Ozempic. It's been a very aggressive marketing. And so if you have any daughters or yourself, if you're on social media, you've probably seen numerous ads related to Ozempic. And we call them ads, but a lot of times they package them in a way in which they don't look like ads, using influencers on social media who you'll see, and their algorithm will target to try to make sure that you get targeted these videos from these other users. And it's all focused on almost the vast majority of those influencer videos are focused on weight loss.
So what they're probably not marketing is the negative effects it's having on people.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, they're not marketing the extreme severity. I have seen, multiple of these videos where they talk about, they had nausea or they threw up a few times, but it was worth it.
Yeah.
And then they cut to the picture of the swimsuit body, which is like the after effects. And so they show those short-term issues, but that's not what we're talking about in this lawsuit. We're talking about people who are, their stomach is so paralyzed, they're not emptying food. And so it's not just like a couple times vomiting. It's a constant vomiting. It's a constant malabsorption problem. if you're not absorbing food and water, you're going to have a lot of other issues as well. So it's not just even gastroparesis. There are other things, for example, like compression fractures. If you went through a long period of time, you're not absorbing food and water properly, your body's going to be, dehydrated. You'll get things like compression fractures, kidney stones, higher risk of heart attack, strokes. I mean, there's a whole long list of things that can also happen because you had gastroparesis or you had an intestinal obstruction.
So gastroparesis is this stomach paralysis.
It's stomach paralysis, right? So the food that you're eating and drinking is not getting past the stomach and not being properly digested from there. That's right.
Is it reversible?
There's a lot of people that are in that bucket. They go off the Ozempic, their stomach paralysis clears up. Now, they may still have some permanencies of things that happened because they had dehydration and malabsorption for a period of time. But there's also a segment of the population that still, they go off the Ozempic and their stomach paralysis can get somewhat better, but they still have problems for years after that. So it does seem that there are some people who have a permanent issue with the way in which they are gastric emptying. And so, like I said, that may be a permanency for a segment of the population. We don't know how large that is, whether it's 10, 30%, it's probably somewhere in that range, just from what I'm seeing from my clients.
What are other complications that are stemming from the stomach paralysis?
Yeah, so there's like I said, there's a lot of other complications that happen if you are not, properly absorbing food and water into your system. And so some of those issues, they aren't even related. I kind of call it the plumbing of the body. They're not the stomach. They're not the intestine, but there are other issues that are happening as well. So you have an increased risk of, like I said, stomach or kidney stones, infections throughout the body, compression fractures. You can have higher risk of heart attack, stroke, sort of the indicia of, if somebody were to wander through the Sahara Desert for a long period of time and they were just malabsorbed and dehydrated, they have a plethora of things that can cause that can happen to them. That's the same sort of thing that can happen from somebody who suffers from severe stomach paralysis or intestinal obstruction for a long period of time.
Do we know how likely it is for someone on Ozempic to develop stomach paralysis?
I don't think we have a good sense of what the exact statistics are on that one, but from looking at some of the epidemiological studies, it does seem to be that the percentage might be somewhere between 1 to 10%. And I combine gastroparesis and intestinal obstruction for that data point, but somewhere between 1 to 10% of the population.
Do you have a sense? I've heard speculation of what percentage of the U.S. population is taking Ozempic as we sit here today.
Yeah, it's approximately 2% that are either taking Ozempic or Wegovy of the U.S. population at this point. I heard the statistic 1.7% of the U.S. population.
So that there's a tremendous millions of people affected by the work that you're doing.
That's right. That's right. And I should interject that we've been talking about Ozempic the whole time, but they also have Wegovy, which is the same active ingredient. They're both semaglutide, and Wegovy has the same side effects and is also, causes gastroparesis, causes intestinal obstruction, because it's basically the same drug.
What companies are being sued right now for Ozempic?
The companies that are being sued are Novo Nordisk, and Novo Nordisk, they are the ones who manufacture the Wegovy and Ozempic drugs. And then there are, some cases against Eli Lilly, a much smaller number, for the Mounjaro drug.
Who can file a suit? Who qualifies?
Anybody who has taken Ozempic or Wegovy, and if they have been diagnosed with gastroparesis thereafter or intestinal obstruction, should reach out and contact an attorney.
And what does that process look like?
Well, anybody who's watching here, you pick up the phone, call the number that you'll see a number on this webpage. Call that number, reach out. They're going to fill out a questionnaire. You'll get somebody who's going to fill out a questionnaire with you, basically over the phone. Sometimes they can tell you if you qualify right there. Sometimes it takes an attorney who needs to look at it to see if you qualify for a potential case. And keep in mind, anytime that in these sorts of cases, you're not paying for cost of the case. You're you don't have to pay anything. It's a free consultation. Even if we file a lawsuit or we have to order medical records or any of that sort of thing, clients aren't paying for those costs up front. They only pay if the lawsuit is successful, and then they're only paying a percentage of the cost, or they're only paying for basically out of the proceeds of that settlement. So they're not having to put money up front in these sorts of cases. That the risk is borne by the attorneys.
Is there any difference between someone who might call who took these drugs because they have diabetes versus electively taking it just for weight loss?
If you're taking it for diabetes or you're taking it for weight loss, either Ozempic or Wegovy, then you can qualify. Wegovy's only, I think, I don't know that I've seen anybody taking Wegovy for diabetes. I guess it could be possible that a doctor would prescribe that off label, but I haven't seen it yet. Whereas Ozempic, I've seen both diabetes and weight loss.
Predictions, you want to talk about the case going forward, what you're expecting here over the next month, 2 months, 3 months in the as the litigation gets started?
Yeah, so the litigation was recently consolidated into what we call a multi-district litigation. So the cases were sent to anybody who filed cases in federal court or is going to file cases in federal court. Those cases have been consolidated. They've been sent to the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. They're going to be handled by Judge Prater. And that's where the common issues are all going to be handled in that federal court, meaning, the discovery that has to take place where we get all the documents from the defendants. We see really how bad their marketing scheme was, in abundance of what we know already, like we call it, where there's smoke, there's fire. I suspect we're going to see a lot more fire when we get these documents. But so we've got that. And then there's going to be a lot of legal rulings that have to take place in front of this judge. And sometimes the judges like to have a few of the cases go forward in their courtroom and see if they, with the help of the verdicts that come forward from that, see whether the parties can reach a resolution before we have to remand the cases back to all the individual federal courts, which is what happens later on down the road. Oftentimes that process is a 3-year process until you get to that point where you're remanding cases. So that's what we expect to be happening next. Now, there also will likely be some cases that go forward in state court as well. Some of the couple state courts may be the District of or New Jersey State Court, potentially a few others as well.
Seems like a long road ahead.
Yeah, the cases take time. All drug cases and medical device cases have been handling this for a long time. I mean, it's been doing them for over 15 years. And, I like to say that normally the time frame, about 80% of cases historically take between 3 to 5 years to settle from when the MDL is formed. And so that just happened, last month. And so the time frame would be 3 to 5 years from when that MDL is formed, started from last month. That's 80% of the cases, but about 10% are quicker than that, and 10% are longer than that, but 80% fall in that 3 to 5 year range.
Is there like a statute on when people can join this lawsuit?
Well, that's a great question. The statute, it's called a statute of limitations. And this is the reason that I would try to urge any of the people who are listening to this and think they may qualify should contact a lawyer immediately. If there's a phone number here, you should call that phone number immediately, because if you wait too long, Novo Nordisk is going to file motions saying you waited too long, your case is barred by the statute of limitations. And if you wait too long, they may prevail and your case might be barred before we ever even get to see whether or not you should have been able to prevail in this case.
Daniel Nigh, one of the leaders in Ozempic. I mean, this is a lawsuit that has been an MDL for less than 1 week today. We have one of the guys who's the brains behind the whole lawsuit. It's really a privilege to have you here and to work with you on these cases. It's really a phenomenal opportunity for our firm and all the folks that we're representing. Any parting words?
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bree. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you. That concludes this episode of the King Law Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and check out our socials at King Law Attorneys. And if you've happened to have been injured or charged with a crime, now you know who to call. Breaking law. Take charge.